Dowson here from mimicmethod.com. It's a live video, and I want to take this video to talk about a very common question I hear, which is, at what stage should you learn grammar in Spanish, but also in any language, though it might vary depending on the language you're learning. So first, let's talk a bit about what is grammar. People tend to focus on grammar, and the standard time that people start learning it is right away, right? So imagine your first Spanish class you took in middle school. What did you do? The teacher goes on board and says, okay, this is the word hello, hola, and then this is the present tense, and then this is first person, and this is second person, and this is how you conjugate. So everyone knows these words of conjugation. We know tense, singular, plural, and it's all these concepts, all these theories. And the thing is, the most important thing I want you to take away from this video, from this conversation we're having right now, is you need to make a distinction between grammar theory or grammar knowledge and grammar intuition. So what's the difference? Well, grammar theory is when I ask you, how do you conjugate the third person singular in the subjunctive mood when speaking Spanish? Or I ask you, what are the prepositions in English, blah, blah, blah. And these are the things which, by the way, I happen to know grammar very well. I've always had a good knack for grammar theory. I'm a very theoretical thinking intellectual person. And I always hear people, most of the time when people are talking about grammar, even when it's your teacher and they're saying, oh yeah, it's the gerund, it's a preposition. People never know what they're talking about. They never know what they're talking about. And I'll get into why that is. But actually, in our programs, in the mimic method for learning a foreign language, you don't study grammar knowledge. You don't study grammar theory. And when I tell this to people, they're like, well, how do you learn? Isn't studying theory the only way you learn? No, because learning isn't about memorizing ideas and theories. Learning is about building intuition. Learning is about being able to feel and automatically and unconsciously do the activity. What is the activity we're speaking of? Listening to, understanding, and speaking and expressing yourself in a foreign language. In fact, what we really focus on is having a flowing conversation with another human being in that language. So the question is, how do you have a flowing conversation, and how do you have the grammar correct there? Well, to do that, you need to have grammar intuition. So what's grammar intuition? We already talked about grammar knowledge. If I say to you, I has a cheeseburger, and you're a native English speaker, you will instantaneously and intuitively understand and feel that I made a grammar mistake. Now, the second question is, why is that wrong? You might come up with a bunch of grammar theories, but I guarantee you 99% of you won't actually have the right precise answer for it. But it doesn't matter, because you know it feels wrong. In fact, if I walk up to a 6-year-old American child up here in the street and I say, hey, you has cheeseburger? He'd be like, hey, you funny, right? Because he knows intuitively that something was off about the way I spoke. So that ability to know when something is intuitively off, when you or someone else is speaking, that's grammar intuition. And that is what you want. Whether or not you're able to explain why it's off doesn't matter. When you're riding a bicycle, when you learn how to ride a bike, you get on, you stumble around, and then boom, now you can just ride. It's the easiest thing in the world. Do you need to know the theory of rotational physics? Do you need to know the theory of torque? Do you need to know the theory of momentum and, P equals mass times velocity? No, you don't need to know any of that stuff. You just need to get on the bike and ride. It's the same thing for having a conversation. When you're speaking and listening to me right now in English, are you processing, conjugating verbs in your head? Are you running charts and thinking about the third person singular? No, you're not doing any of that. You're just intuitively understanding. And the moment where I says something is off that, then you're like, whoa, what's going on? This guy's talking weird. His grammar is off. So that's grammar intuition. So the question then becomes, how do we learn grammar intuition? And the clue is in the way I initially presented the concept. If I go to you and I say, I is a teddy bear versus I am a teddy bear, you be like, boom, that one's wrong and the other one's right. And the question is why? You might have a theory answer, but the real answer is this. One of those just sounds wrong. One of those just sounds right to me. It feels right to me. So grammar intuition is about how things feel based on how things sound. So how do you develop that intuition? Well, if you're here's how it works on a deep neurological level. What happens is you hear people say, I am, I am, I am. You hear those sound effects over and over again, a billion times by the time you're a small child. And what happens is your brain, the subconscious part of your brain, which is there to recognize patterns, picks up on that and then puts it in an automatic realm. And now you hear I am, 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 right? And then you hear he is, he is, he is, he is, he he is, he is, he is, he is, he is, he is. So those are two different sound effects that go together, right? And then one day someone comes and says, he am. And you're like, oh, psh. And your brain recognizes that there was an anomaly, that this has never happened. You've seen this pattern a billion times before, but this has never happened. Something is off. That is grammar intuition. Now, the question is, how do you get there? You need to let that information flow in. So let's summarize this all right now. How do I learn grammar in a new language? How do I learn a language? Step one is I unblock the flow. I allow myself to hear and open up my ears so that the Spanish language can come in. Hola, ¿qué tal, amigo? Bueno, estamos aquí porque hay mucha gente que está pasando en una cosita, entonces, right? And then if someone says to me, ellos pasaron la cosa, that sounds natural. But if someone says, I was speaking to someone today at an event, and he said he was half Cuban. And I said, oh, hablas español, entonces. And he's like, sí, 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 yo falo español. And something clicked in my head. I'm like, this is kind of weird. And then I was like, você fala português também, né? He's like, sim, sim, eu falo português. And I was like, okay, so he's not a native speaker. What happened was he knows Portuguese and Spanish. But he said, yo falo. And the thing is, falo is the word for to speak in Portuguese. It doesn't exist in Spanish. So immediately my ear triggered that something is off in the way this guy's speaking. But it wasn't immediate. I was like, wait, what? I thought you were Cuban. Why are you, what's going on? Something's weird. I'm like, oh, okay. And then the realization didn't come until later. The intuition came first. Why? Because I lived in Colombia. I lived in Mexico. I spent a lot of time in Spain and other Spanish-speaking countries, Chile. In none of these places have ever heard a native speaker say, yo falo. I've never heard those sound effects ever happen. So I've had billions of repetitions in my unconscious brain of that grammar pattern, so the new one is off. And when I'm speaking and I say something that's off grammatically, I have a sense of when it's off. I'm like, I'm going to say this anyway because I want to express myself, but I feel like this is not how a native speaker will have said it. So really, your goal here when learning, everything has grammar. And what that is to say is that everything has an underlying structure. However, if you try to understand that structure intellectually before you feel it intuitively, it won't make any sense to you. That's why you need to have the experiential knowledge first. You need to have your unconscious brain observe and perceive the patterns through billions of repetitions. Maybe not billions, but through lots and lots of repetitions. Then the rules start to emerge out of that. And sometimes it's useful to articulate that rule and be like, okay, I get it. When you guys are speaking about in the past, you make different sound effects at the end of your verbs, right? At the end of your action sound effects, right? That's what that means when you're conjugating a verb. But I don't need to know the term conjugation. I can just intuitively perceive, say, when this guy's talking about the present, he says, yo estoy aquí. But when he's talking about the past, he's saying like, hey, what's up, man?
Hey, my name's Ron.
Ron, what's up, man? Idausa.
What is it?
Idausa.
Idausa.
Yeah. Doing a YouTube live right now. Here, say Ron, everybody. Doing a YouTube live right now, just talking about Spanish.
But keep going.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, so the idea here is that you don't need to know the rules. In fact, if you try to learn the rules, this is why I experience all the time. if you try to learn the rules before you can feel the game, you'll start to mess yourself up. You'll start to psych yourself out. You want to get into a conversation, but you can't speak. Why? Because you're translating in your head. You're running mathematical equations and algorithms in your head, and then you're getting stuck, right? Show of hands here, comment section. Let me know how many of you try to speak in a language, but you're running grammar rules in your head in Spanish, and then you get stuck, you get nervous, and you can't perform. So you want to be able to circumvent all that. You want to be able to go have experiences first, develop an intuition, be okay with being wrong, being okay with falling over on the bike. Then once you have those click aha moments, then it's kind of useful for someone to point out in an explicit manner, okay, that's why you do it that way, and that's why you do it that way. But if you do that ahead of time, it only causes problems. So for me personally, I don't study grammar until I'm already conversational. And what I mean by that is I'm able to understand people and get a gist of what they're saying. I might not know that verb form, but because everything's flowing in and I can look at context and I've been there, I know what's going on. Then when it's time for me to speak, I'm cobbling together whatever sound effects I can to get my idea across. And I don't care if my grammar is correct. But over time, you'll have these moments where you're kind of like, I feel like the right way to say this is this way, blah, 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 blah. And you look at the guy and like, was that right? They're like, yeah, that was right. I'm like, oh crap, how did I know that? How did you know that? That's how your super vast unconscious brain functions. That's how you know it. Then later on, once you're already conversational, when I want to take things that's going from 0 to 80. When I want to go from 80 to 95, then what's going on is I sit down with a tutor, I record myself, and then I ask them, what are the things that I'm saying that sound the most awkward? And then we kind of rank order them, and we're like, okay, your prepositions are off, but who cares about that right now? People understand you. But the way you're talking about things in the past, here's how it should work. And here's what happens. This is the beautiful part. Because I already have all that experience, and some part of my brain already knows this, when someone points it out to me and they're like, oh, when you talk about the past, here's how you say it. You're like, oh, yeah, you're right. I noticed that. You're right. Boom, boom, click, 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 click. Now you can adapt that grammar pattern. Compare that to someone teaching you, hey, this is third person conjugation of subjunctive form in the past. You've never heard it in your life, but here's how it works. That's kind of like sitting someone down who's never ridden a bicycle in their life and being like, hey, this is how rotational physics works. This is what a bike is like. I'll give you a quick example before I end this YouTube live video. Right now, I'm here at a business retreat in Utah on a mountain top called Powder Mountain. And I've never strapped on a ski in my life, right? But I plan to tomorrow. And I'm asking people for tips or just listen to the conversation. Everyone here's a skier. And they're all like, yeah, I like it when it's powdery. When you put your weight here, you edge around it. And there's always conversation going on about skiing. And it's super interesting because none of it makes any sense to me. I have no idea what anyone's talking about. Why? Because they're discussing concepts, but their concepts are based on experiences that they've all shared. I haven't had that experience yet, so it doesn't make any sense to me. The grammar of skiing makes no sense to me. So if someone tried to explain it to me, it would be useless. It'd be wasting my time, which is why tomorrow I'm just going to go strap on some skis, fall down the cliff a couple of times, do a bunch of things, and then afterwards, I'm like, why did that happen? It's like, oh, because it's powdery here, or because your weight. I'm like, really? And then I go and do it again. I'm like, oh, now I get what he's saying. You see what I'm saying? So experience comes first. Grammar comes later. So you shouldn't learn grammar until you already know grammar in your deeper part of your subconscious mind. So I hope that was a useful thing. One thing I really try to work on in the Mimic Method, these new courses we're developing, I've come to find that the biggest challenge or the biggest mission I have as a teacher is teaching people how to act in the face of uncertainty. And the problem with grammar and the problem of our schooling system is people don't want to move until they're certain that the movement is going to be right. And the paradox of that is that 99.99% of your time, your first move will always be wrong. But the only way to learn is to move. So you need to be willing to be wrong. So my real answer to this question is when to learn grammar. My real answer is stop worrying about grammar. Focus on just flowing, understanding and expressing yourself to the best of your ability, and then trust your vast, trillions of neuronal connections in your brain will figure out the rest. But in order for that to happen, you need to be open to the sounds. You need to be well tuned here in your mouth so you can create those sounds. And then when you have that connection in place, grammar will start to flow out of you intuitively. And then once you get to that conversational stage, someone can point to you and be like, oh, by the way, have you noticed this before? This is how we speak when we're not quite sure if the person exists with you. I'm like, oh, yeah, you're right. Like in Spanish, you say, you know, espero que tenga un buen día. And I'm like, oh, when I'm talking about this, I don't say tiene, like I usually say. I'll say tenga, interesting. I don't need to know the rule for that. Let me just mimic it. And then afterwards, I can become a grammar theory person or not. Because guess what? Most people are grammatical and they don't know grammar theory in their own language. So what's that tell you about the importance of learning grammar in a second one? Okay? I hope you guys found this useful. If you like this video, please subscribe. I'm going to make an attempt to do a YouTube video, a YouTube live every day for the next couple of weeks and see how that affects our subscribers. We're trying to get more and more subscribers so we can make more content for you guys. Write us in the comments. Let us know what you want me to talk about in the next video, any questions you have. And yeah, and if you subscribe and if you like and if you comment, then that will motivate me to give you guys more useful language learning tips. And stay tuned for a new course coming out soon. But subscribe below, please. We got a goal we're trying to reach here. Subscribe, subscribe, subscribe. Hasta luego. And once again, forget about grammar. Focus on the flow, and the grammar shall follow. All right, guys. Thanks for watching.